On episode 13 of Chit Chat, we talk all things Kickstarter. What ones do we back? What ones don't we back? Which publishers are doing it right? And how are retailers adapting? And we save a little time to talk about the ones we're getting to the table. Welcome to episode 13, lucky number 13 of Chit Chat, and we are going to talk about Kickstarter today. And as you may know, if you follow us on social media, we do have a Kickstarter coming up. We promise this is not just a blatant plug for that Kickstarter, but go check it out. No, we want to talk about Kickstarter because there's a lot of attitudes and opinions about this, from retailers to publishers to people that are just part of the hobby. So we're going to dive in and talk about all those different topics. As always, we got Ryan, we got Gary, myself, and Jeremy. So let's dive in. Let's talk about how many times you kickstart. Like, what do you got going on?
I kickstart a lot. Board game wise, I probably backed roughly 80 board games on Kickstarter since, but I've been backing games on Kickstarter since the beginning of Kickstarter.
Wow.
So it's been quite a few years that those games are spread out over.
Speaking of that, does anyone know how long Kickstarter has been going, roughly?
I do not.
I couldn't tell you.
It's been a
Probably
while,
something we
though.
should know,
mean,
but
Is it close to a decade? Yeah, we did a lot of research for this episode. No, but I mean, in the time that it's been going, even 80 games is quite a bit. And you said, including other things, even like 150 things you've kickstarted?
yeah, close. I mean, there's a lot of that is, I do a lot of role-playing game. I'm pretty involved in the role-playing game community, so I back a lot of games, you know, and things that are PDFs for $5, which is what I love to do with Kickstarter.
And just to check them out, too, right?
Right.
Like you may not necessarily play them.
Oh, I don't get to play them.
Yeah.
I read them. I'll read them and catalog them and reference them, but you know, $5 for a PDF is not a bad deal. So,
No, not at all. I've probably been involved getting or backing games on Kickstarter probably the last, probably a little over 2 years now. Once I started getting more into the hobby, and I've only backed about 20 games. I'm guessing more so lately, but you know, some of those I still haven't got, but I've backed at 20 at my last count.
It is an easy thing to get swept up into,
It
right?
is, and you know, I'll even say sometimes even if I don't know a game that well, I'm not quite sure, I still like to go ahead and get that early bird special, and then I'll research it as I go on.
So all you people running Kickstarters,
that's
he's
my
the guy.
Tip. Yeah, that's my pro tip for the night.
So I've backed 13 things in my career, and not all of those are board games. I'd say it's probably like 10 or 12 of those, maybe 10 or 11 of those are board games, a couple video games. Because the first time I started backing, it was when board games hadn't had as much of an impact on Kickstarter as they do today. Like, they've now become, I think, one of, if not the lead category on Kickstarter.
It is the lead.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't that way. In the
By
early
far.
days, there was a lot of video games out there, but a lot of those ended up being vaporware. You know,
Yeah.
people would launch the Kickstarter. And this is in the early days, too, where you weren't so
Sure,
sure
it's gonna
whether
be
a
delivered.
Kickstarter was going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that even happened with a lot of board games, but these days it feels a little bit more stable. So yeah, probably about 10 board games, and that's probably in the last 4 or so years total. So I don't do a lot. I am thinking about doing more, and I do get caught up in it. You guys talk about all these games lately, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should back it.
Yeah.
I'm regretting not having. I didn't back Rising Sun, and I wish I had.
I don't know when Kickstarter started. I believe it was 2009, 2010, but I know that the board game industry really didn't start using it until several years later.
Yeah.
And that's when you started to have this implosion. I've backed about 50 games. I'm the kind of person, though, that believes, like, when you're paying for creative talent, like, people, there's a lot of creative people in this industry, a lot of creative publishers, designers, artists, graphic designers, and I believe that it's probably, even as reviewers, that it's important for us to buy specific games if we really are passionate about those games. That's why I go and I back those games, even though I know that as reviewers we can probably attain those games.
Right.
But Kickstarter as a platform, though, I think is really unique because it allows a publisher, whether it's a large mainstream publisher or a smaller publisher, to do things that they typically couldn't do in retail. Like, I don't think any company is going to put it out there and want to produce 5,000 games with metal coins or miniatures and absorb that cost, you know, the cost that it takes to do a mold for any of those, and then hope that that game sells in retail. And there's a dual-edged sword to that. For the retailers, they're feeling the pain of that because they don't see those dollars coming back to them. The distributors don't see those dollars. This is a direct-to-door. When you kickstart, that product comes directly to you. It goes from the publisher to the manufacturer to whatever shipping company sends it out to you, right? But again, that allows these publishers to create things like Rising Sun. You couldn't buy everything that we got in Rising Sun for $100 in retail. That would be a $200+ game to buy.
Well, and what's interesting is you couldn't traditionally, but the way that CMON's done a great job of setting up their programs to support retailers too, because a lot of the retailers are now able to back that, and they're actually selling Rising Sun, the Daimyo package, for the same Kickstarter price.
Yes, but what is their buy-in for that? So if you go through traditional distribution, there is a cost to that. So say you buy if you're a retailer, you're buying that product from a distributor. Say it's a $40 MSRP. You're buying that for probably around $15 to $20, and then you're making double that in retail.
Sure.
Right.
That changes. I don't think even with the CMON program that they're buying that product for 50% off. They're probably buying that and making small margins to no margins at all just to drive the customer to come into their store.
And the thing about, and that is the case with a lot of Kickstarters, but from what I've heard, at least on the Rising Sun Kickstarter, is they were still allowed to make a decent margin. It's probably not what they would have otherwise, but they were really pleased with it. And that's the good thing. And one of the topics we'll get on here is traditional friendly local game stores and Kickstarters and their attitude towards it, because obviously it is a shift in the industry. Like you said, there's a lot of games that are possible now because of Kickstarter. That is a good thing for the hobby.
Right.
I think even any game store owner, as probably a board gamer themselves, would recognize good thing for the hobby. It's a difficult thing for them to navigate because as an industry goes and as a hobby grows, but it's potentially not part of their traditional mechanism for getting it out there, they're not as much of a part of it. So when CMON does something like that, I think it's a really good thing. And then there's some others that don't do anything like that. And those are the ones that really end up rubbing some of the retailers the wrong way.
And, you know, and I understand if you're a retailer, I understand that point of view. But at the same time, you know, maybe it's kind of a poor analogy. I'm thinking of the music industry. The music industry was a couple of labels for the decades. And then Apple comes in and goes, you know, we're just going to sell singles. And it has allowed, first off, it's allowed the consumer, like, wow, there's so many more options because these people can go out there and throw their 1 or 2 songs out. But it killed a lot of those classic labels. They don't have that power anymore. I could see kind of the same way here what Kickstarter is doing. And it's good for the consumer. You know, I can understand the retailer point of view, but, you know, that's change. And I appreciate that because it forces people like, okay, this is the old model's not working. Let's get the new model out. And whatever you're trying to do is you're trying to make the consumer happy. And consumers are pretty happy right now in the board game industry.
But on the flip side of that, look at the music industry today. There's no retailers that sell cassettes or CDs.
No.
Yeah,
Even Best Buy
all
is
those
all
digital.
So that's got to be concerning to the retailers if this is the way that the market's going. Because you can't go out and buy a $1.99 download for a board game, right? You need to buy the entire product.
And that's, I think, why you're starting to see shifts in the FLGSs going to more of these like cafe styles. We need to bring people in. You know, maybe we're not going to make money on the games, but we'll make money having them come in and buy food.
Well, yeah,
you know?
well, and not only that, but doing things,
give another atmosphere.
Doing things on site that make it more of a destination for people for other reasons than to I'm going there just to buy a board game. Yeah. If you go to a store and that's where you hang out and that's where you play games and you build up that loyalty where they know you, you walk in the door and they're like, hey, David, how's it going? Then it feels, people are more inclined to continue to be a patron of that store, even if it costs a little bit more than online. Or the Kickstarter thing too. I mean, we all have to remember, Kickstarter's not all board games.
No.
Like, it's a segment of board games.
Well,
now, there's more and more popping up there.
Started for it's never how it started.
Yeah.
Like,
I want to kind of bring it back because I want to talk, for the people who are watching the show, I also want to give it kind of a blanket statement here. We aren't supporting the publishers. We aren't supporting Kickstarter people. We're kind of just saying the facts as we see them, right?
Yeah, our attitudes, even other people's.
Okay, so what I want to say is a lot of the complaints I see online are, why are these very entrenched publishers that we see doing Kickstarters? People like CMON or Renegade, why do they feel like they would need to do a Kickstarter when they have the revenue in order to do them? And I'll say this because it's important to understand this. When I started going to Gen Con 23 years ago, this was pre-2000, right? Gen Con was primarily a miniatures RPG video game atmosphere, right? in the past 5 years, we've seen 5 to 6 times more board games being introduced to the market because of Kickstarter. So now the market is so saturated with product. Every single day, we get 2 or 3 games to our doorstep, but we can't cover them. So these publishers are now fighting against not only their own products, but other people's products from everywhere, and not just from established publishers. So what Kickstarter does for these publishers is it allows them a marketing platform that everybody goes to. And it also allows them to gauge what their production levels should be. If they feel very strongly about a design that they've got from a designer, they've sat down at a convention, they said, this looks incredible, and they put it on Kickstarter, and they get 200 backers, what if they had gone to production and printed 5,000 of those?
Sure.
Yeah.
This allows them to do that. So I am kind of defending the publishers. I understand why they do this. Whether that's good, an established publisher does it or not, that's not really for me to question, but I understand why they have to go this route.
Well, no, and I agree, and I think it's important. One of the things you mentioned is consumer focus, and that's like any industry. The consumer is generally going to drive where things go.
Right.
So like you said with the music industry, I would even make the same analogy even with what we do. Like there's a lot of YouTube content these days that has absolutely had an impact. YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff has had a huge impact on network television watching, cable television watching. How many of us have cut our cable?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
all of us.
All of us.
Have you?
Me.
You're probably maybe the only one that hasn't.
I think I'm the only one that doesn't, but only
Yeah.
because it's part of my bundle. I can't I can't get rid of it yet. So.
But so my point is, there's a lot of people and a lot of businesses along that entire food chain, just like with the board games, that have to adapt. And I don't mean that to sound like a tough message to all the FLGS out there, but it is something that they're adapting to. And there's a lot of stores, like you said, are doing some things to make it so that we want to go there.
Yeah.
And even buy our games there. Like, for instance, like I mentioned earlier, I missed Rising Sun. I'm buying it from one of our local game stores because of that, and because of the mechanism that Simon put in place to sell it to
Yeah,
us.
I think it's very important for publishers to find that medium with
Yep.
the retailers. If they want to keep the retailers around, which ultimately create generations of new gamers for us,
Right.
they need to find a way that it makes it happy for them as well.
I think Rising Sun's a great example of what you were talking about earlier. I'm kind of in a unique position. I've both ran Kickstarters that have product put out there and backed a bunch, and I've kind of I see where people are going both ways. But I love that big companies using Kickstarter for one reason, and Rising Sun is a great example of this. Because a game like Rising Sun, when they're conceptualizing that game and they're planning out what they're going to do, they're going to cut costs, right? They're going to put that game out as cheaply as they can. They're going to use cardboard chits, right? They're going to use little cardboard tokens, maybe not even use miniatures. But when they put it on Kickstarter, they know how much money they're going to have to spend, right? Because they're bringing in all these millions of dollars, so they can say, well, let's not use these cardboard tokens. Let's upgrade to plastic miniatures.
Well, that's the whole
Let's
idea of
upgrade
like, stretch goals helps that
Right.
happen.
Right, and we're not going to get those. If Rising Sun had gone straight to retail, we
Right.
wouldn't have any of those
I
miniatures.
think most consumers feel that way.
Yeah, it's hugely great for the industry.
This is a battle that's taking place between the retailers and the distributors and Kickstarter.
But even for retailers, I mean, now they're getting access to that content.
not all of them. I mean,
Not all of
Simon's
them.
a very small portion. There's a lot of them out here that are selling millions of dollars that don't have a retail presence at all.
Yeah.
I could name several of them.
I would
but
love
yeah.
I would love to see, and I was actually thinking about this the other day, a stronger partnership between Kickstarter and friendly local game stores. I would love to see the option that a friendly local game store could go into Kickstarter, back a project, and get some sort of incentive from Kickstarter to back 100 copies, 50 copies, whatever.
There's also a culture that's been built around Kickstarter too of having exclusivity. That's another thing we probably need to touch on. There's something cool about Kickstarter, and we're all guilty of it, of getting something that's exclusive for you backing that you can't buy in retail. That's a problem, and I don't know how to solve that because once you go past a threshold, and this has been going on for several years now, how do you pull back? I don't think there's a way to pull back because now people expect that out of their Kickstarters.
That's a really good point. I mean,
they expect the stretch goals. We want good stretch goals. We want a lot of stretch goals.
But I think they also expect some exclusivity because what you're seeing now, even on a campaign that we just covered for a preview, people are looking at this and saying, I can get all this in retail.
Yeah.
Why do I need to give you money
See
right
those
now if I
comments
get
all
the
the time.
exact same product in retail when it releases?
I would agree. You're definitely seeing more of that. You know, I'm going to sit here and say and admit that I've gone, you know what? This is all going to come in the retail copy. I don't need to back it right now. You know, I don't feel like the need to. Maybe I don't have the money or whatever it is. Like, I'll just wait till it's on retail.
That's a natural.
Sometimes when it comes to retail, let's just all admit it. Everybody's like, well, if that's supposed to be on retail, that's probably going to get to Amazon, and I'm going to even get it even cheaper. I just got to wait a little while longer. So yeah, that's a really good point about the exclusive content that sometimes you can get because you're not seeing it as much in the Kickstarters.
You see it less from established companies, more from these other smaller
Yeah.
companies that are making millions of dollars.
Right.
When I think,
Well, and then with these big titles, I mean, there's titles out there that are the title in and of itself is exclusive. to
Again,
Kickstarter.
it's that steam ball. It just keeps rolling and rolling. The more exclusive content they offer, the more backers they're going to get. Because
like
they
for
know
a
they can't
small
get it anywhere
publisher,
else.
like a small publisher or a first-time publisher, an indie publisher, and first of all, I think the Kickstarter community has been pretty good about policing itself. They have a lot of backers have expectations that we're talking about. When you see CMON Go or you see AEG or Renegade or a big company maybe, whatever that's using Kickstarter. But when you have a small indie publisher that's maybe going to make 500 copies of their game, never plan to see retail. I mean, people say that those projects are going to be killed by all these big companies, but I haven't been seeing that. In fact, I think I've been seeing the opposite in that I'm seeing way more of these small little Kickstarter games showing up. You know, like Vast, I think, is a great example of that. Like, that game blew up.
We've seen whole companies become companies because of Kickstarter.
Absolutely.
Some ones I can think of are, well, like Role Player. Role Player was nothing before that game. Tiny Epic. Tiny Epic made its series out of Kickstarter titles, and now it's prolific everywhere. You know,
I mean, look at CMON in general.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's where CMON started, right? With all of the old games.
Like Zombicide, first Zombicide, that was like one of the first ones.
They were born there for the most part, and now they're, you know, one of the giants in the industry.
And that's one of the great, I think, kind of equalizers still with Kickstarter is everybody, if you go on Kickstarter, everybody's on the even plane. Your stuff is there, along with CMON's and your little publisher, so everybody's got a chance.
That is a good point.
Really nice equalizer because, you know, it's hard to get in there to go into maybe a bigger publisher and go, I want my game. Like, I don't see it. Well, I'm going to put it on Kickstarter. Oh, people want to play my game.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, the consumer will always speak. I mean,
Absolutely.
We've seen that. We've seen that with huge publishers who release games just recently, and they just don't do well because the game just. People are smarter now too. I mean,
absolutely.
When you release a rule book to the public, the consumer's becoming more savvy. They know what you're trying to put out. They see something if it's not right. I mean,
and the businesses are adapting. They're just going to have to. Because it is a consumer-based organization as a whole world.
Yeah.
So, you know, they'll adapt. I'm not really worried about it, but, you know, it is interesting. Real quick, I want to say something about the exclusiveness. It seems like we haven't actually seen it yet, but we've seen or heard about games like, you know what, you want this game, you're only going to get it on Kickstarter.
There's a few.
There's several of them.
They might have exclusive content, but the game itself that's it.
I mean, we heard recently of a game that we've been playing that's may only be our Kickstarter.
Right. And so you're going to start,
Yeah.
that's another interesting way that maybe business are do like, okay, fine, you want this game and we want to give it to you, you're going to only get it here.
It makes absolute sense. I mean, big companies get a lot of flack for that. But in reality, if you can cut out the middleman,
Oh, that's a smart business
that's
move.
a hugely. I mean, that's huge.
Sure.
Yeah.
Even if you're selling less copies, you're making way more money.
Right.
So I would be surprised to see a future where more and more companies just use Kickstarter as their storefront, basically.
Yeah, we've mentioned consumers. You've talked about big companies getting a lot of flack. One of the things I think we have to talk about when we're talking about Kickstarter is how the Kickstarter community behaves at times. And I'm sure we'll probably get flack for even mentioning this from some people. But I do think, I don't want to tear into anybody, but the one major thing I would say is, if you are a Kickstarter consumer, before you complain, before you just burn anyone to the ground on the comments section, stop and think for a second that you might not be aware of all the things that are going on behind the scenes and how difficult it is for those companies to be pulling off what they're pulling off. Like Jeremy said, a lot of these guys are really small little companies. They're not a lot of people pulling these things together.
And they usually have full-time jobs in addition to what they're doing.
Exactly. And they also might not know exactly what they're doing.
Right.
Our first Kickstarter, we didn't know what we were doing. We were like learning as we went. So it's a tricky thing, and not everyone's going to be happy. And a lot of those people will try to do as best they can to manage that. But I would just say give them a break, or err on the side of giving them the benefit of the doubt before you start burning.
You know, I've watched and read some of Jamie Stegmaier's stuff, who's really big into, hey, if you want to do a Kickstarter, I've got a kind of a program. I've written a lot of stuff. Learn from my mistakes. And of course, there's still a lot of people that don't heed that or any other information. And you're right. You know, you always, usually like a big complaint, a simple one is shipping. You know, I don't understand shipping. And sometimes I look at games like, wow, $20 for shipping for that game, you know, I don't have all the information. But the last thing I'm really going to do is go on there and start harassing the creator, who probably doesn't know himself, you know, and I'm sure they're working on it. It's always great to be constructive. I think TMG is another company. Every time I see their Kickstarter, it just gets better. It's better, well, you know, how they produce it and how they present it, and very open and just being engaging with your with your backers. Yeah. If you're going to be aggressive, they're just probably not going to entertain you very much.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can get away with a lot of mistakes, and I guess this is advice to anybody that's running a Kickstarter or any publisher. You can mess up a lot as long as you keep that open communication. Yeah. As long as you are like completely transparent about what's going on. If you made a mistake and you cop to it, then backers are generally pretty forgiving. But I think it's when there's an obvious problem and it's been a year with no update that people start to get, and they get a little fit. And I can't blame them for being a little
There's a lot upset. Of entitlement with Kickstarter backers. Yeah. And again, I think that's the culture that's kind of steamrolled over time. The longer Kickstarter is out, the more people expect. And when they see a publisher, again, I'm going to go back to this. When they see a publisher who's established publisher releasing a game and they complain, why don't you just stick this in retail? Like, why do you need to do this? Again, if you owned a pharmacy in a city, and then 40 other pharmacies came in 2 years later, what would you do? You would do everything possible to be able to push your product out to consumers. Yeah. Kickstarter is that platform. It allows them to gauge what they need to do for it. So
where business
again, I mean, you have to understand that when you're on there, that people are doing this for a reason. It's not because they're trying to pull one over on you. It's because they really feel legitimate about the product they're trying to deliver.
Yeah, and often, in almost all cases, it's because they're trying to bring a product to market that, like we said earlier, is probably not easy to bring to market through the traditional channels.
Well, there's no risk to them with Kickstarter, and that's the thing. And I think people don't realize that whenever somebody complains, "Oh, why is Simon using Kickstarter?" I'm like, well, do you like Simon as a company? Because in this industry, all it takes is one bad product, and you can put you out of business. I mean, if they go all in on something without using Kickstarter, they spend all their money, you know, print thousands of copies, and then no one buys them. Like, that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
And if you don't like the game, don't back it.
I was just about to say, at the end of the
more
day,
than enough
you
games are
don't
going to be
have
launched
to
every
back
week.
the game.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Go move on to something
Some people
else.
feel like they still need to say why. They're
I don't
not,
understand that. Why do people pay $1 just to complain in the comments? That's
know.
the weirdest thing.
You're never going to find an answer to that.
People want to complain.
People are almost more vocal about what they're not backing sometimes than what they are backing.
It's just the weirdest thing. Like, I'm going to bid $1 or pay you $1 so I can
troll
sit here
everybody.
and troll you until your campaign's over.
Why? I want to find something else better to do during your day.
I don't get that. Like you said, there's so many other good games these days. That's one thing I've noticed. I assume all of you guys too, the trend. I remember when I first started jumping on Kickstarter, you had to wade through a fair amount of not so great product. Yeah. Like there was, it was like the gold rush, right? It came on the scene and everyone was like, oh, well, I can make a game. Yeah. Boom. And you know, it's like they look like they drew the art themselves, but they're not an artist and things like that. Today, that is not the case. There's nowhere near as many of those types of Kickstarters running. People have seen what works. There's a lot of gorgeous Kickstarter pages. We're like connoisseurs. You know, we love a good Kickstarter page. We just saw, what was it, the Dice Throne?
Yeah, from
Dice Throne from Roxley. Roxley is knocking it out of the park with their Kickstarter pages. From just a presentation standpoint, it's super meaningful. And this is not directed at Roxley. There are other companies that put out great-looking Kickstarter pages with not-so-great games and have made millions of dollars. Roxley, though, is just knocking it out of the park. They back it up with a good game, and it looks pretty.
And, you know, go back to real quick, you said there's smarter consumers because they're board gamers. As soon as you put the rule book out there, I saw about 2 weeks ago, there was a Kickstarter game, like, oh, this is what it is. And there was hardly anything on the page. And I get in the comments, they're like, where's the rule book? Where's the rule book?
Yeah.
And people can figure out games now by rule books.
Right.
And that's huge, and that's why it's weeding out all the bad games.
People are expecting more now. I mean,
Right.
And it's good because
Well, we want bang for our buck too.
Well, you
you
can't
know?
go to Kickstarter with a half-designed
I want to give you
product.
money, but I want something good. I want a good
Right.
product.
This will be a great conversation because we're going to GAMA in a couple weeks,
Yep.
and I think that will be. I mean, of course, GAMA is a lot of retailers there.
Yeah.
I'm sure this will be a hot topic like it was last year.
It was
as well.
last year too, for sure.
All right, games that we've been playing.
Yeah.
I'll start first.
Any
right.
Kickstarter games you've been
We,
playing?
I mean,
Actually,
we
yeah.
did like
Maybe one today.
we did like 8 Kickstarters in the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, a lot of
So
Kickstarters.
we played a lot of Kickstarter games, but I'll talk about a couple that aren't Kickstarter. One was Thunder. Well, I guess it was
Yeah, that's
Kickstarter.
what I'm saying.
Thunderstone Quest. We got to finally play our first game.
Yeah.
I've been a Thunderstone fan since 2010 when it first released. I love that. It's still my favorite deck building game of all time. And they've made it better. There's a lot of new rules in it. It's just a meatier game, but there's so many variables now. Like,
It's ridiculous.
I mean, the old
actually.
expansion. I mean, with all the older expansions, you had a lot of variables, but now it's self-contained, and they give you now a campaign that you can play through. You have side quests that you can do, like charters, different guilds that you can be a part of that give you ongoing bonuses. The artwork has all been updated. It looks really nice.
Jeremy could do a whole episode on Thunderstone Quest because I don't know about you guys. He was probably as excited for this as anything we've seen him get in the last.
No,
several
yeah. I
months.
mean, I had never played it, but I mean, I backed it just knowing the the buzz and it. Man,
well,
it
the
did not
box,
disappoint
the
at all.
box is ridiculous.
It's like 2/3 the size of a Gloomhaven box.
It's
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
And that's
It
a
is-
big
it's
box.
18
If you have a
pounds.
Gloomhaven
Yeah,
box.
18 pounds.
18 pounds of game.
And that's
That
like
is
all.
a
That's
lot.
mostly cards.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
90% cards.
Even
It's
has like a
crazy.
little box that has straps that you have to pull out. To,
That's so cool.
It's very neat. And then First Class is really, besides all the Kickstarter games.
that's right.
We pulled First Class out again.
I
Played
love
with
that
my
game.
wife. The game is really good.
It is so good. You know, if you don't know what First Class is, I mean, it started out as to be Russian. It's by the Russian Railroad guy. I forget his name. Slipped me, but it's supposed to be Russian Railroad's the card game. But what I understand, as he kept going with it, he's like, you know, I got a little something different here. And yeah, if you don't have First Class, get it. It's fantastic. It's easy to teach.
Yeah.
And super variable, and you'll have a really good
It's one of my
time.
top 10 games of all
Oh,
time.
I love it.
Oh, yeah.
It's got all
No
the
kidding.
modules.
I love First Class. I could play that game over and over again.
Wow.
Did you get the expansion module F?
I need to get
No,
that.
I need to get it. I didn't
have
know.
that.
I've been waiting for it. I didn't know if
Yeah.
it was actually out in the States yet.
I ordered it from Germany or somewhere. It's all English, so.
Amazon
But,
Germany, right?
Yeah. That's what I've been playing.
I pulled out, and we've talked about this one before too, Grand Austria Hotel. You
Oh, you
played it,
did.
and it was probably because you had mentioned it,
I think I had a perfect game.
or you did have a perfect game.
232 points.
That's insane.
If anyone
is-
has more than 32 points, let me know. I don't know if I could have scored more points.
I don't know if I've scored half of 232
I've gotten
points.
close. I think I was at 216 is my best.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I pulled that out with Alicia last weekend, and she actually remembered this one. As I set it on the table, she often needs a little like, what's this one again?
Yeah.
But she remembered it, and clearly so because she beat me. She scored 175 points, which is pretty
Wow, that's
solid,
pretty
right?
good.
It's
Yeah.
a solid score. I scored 108. Which isn't
Emperor problems?
no, not Emperor problem. That's the one thing I made sure. It was just I have a problem with like when she's taking her turn. I'll like, oh, maybe you could consider this. I give tips, and then I don't follow my own tips. Like I just don't know why that is. But she beat me 175 to 108. So, but we still had fun, and
Fantastic 2-player game.
it really is.
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
2-player
It's
game.
been a long time since I don't want to diss it as a 4-player game, but it has been a long time since I played it at 4 players.
It's just going to take a while.
Yeah,
Like 2.5 hours.
That's putting it
while.
nicely.
Yeah.
Take a while. So, the problem with it at 4 players is, as many people already know, is you're waiting for your turn,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful segue to my next game, which we played again last week and we talked about, which is Space Base. This is
Yeah.
one AEG came out and visited us last week. They left this with us, and I've played a ton of it.
It's good.
Like I played it last weekend with family. I played it this week with some friends of mine, and it engages every player around the table. This is not a heavy game.
Nope.
This is a light, friendly, Manchikoro, Splendorish sort of game. But you're rolling dice, and everyone's doing something on your turn, on their turn. So you're not ever not playing effectively. And it's a nice little engine builder. And you're like just building your engine just like you would in those other games. And then all of a sudden everyone's just scoring points and racing to get to the end and win.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that game.
was good.
I think
Very
it's coming
cool.
out in April or something. So definitely look for it.
The 2 games I'll just talk about real quick. We've kind of already mentioned them a little bit, but played Edge of Darkness with you guys.
Oh yeah.
I tell you, if you're backing that, you're gonna love this game. That was really fun, and I haven't played the Mystic Vales, and I haven't played Custom Heroes, and I fell right into this and understood the card crafting mechanic, and I really enjoyed that. That's gonna be a phenomenal game.
Super unique.
Super unique, and not to mention that cube tower is awesome. There's no game out there like that. It's gonna have something like that. So I'm sure you'll start seeing copycatters. And I finally played 6-Man Rising Sun.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was, I tell you, I've played it at 4, I've played it at 5, and now I've played it at 6. 5 is interesting because somebody's not getting an alliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got that. 4 is really good because I think it's it's really balanced at 4-player. When you have 6, only one person is going to get 2 turns of the mandates. And I tell you, I hadn't seen it yet, but I saw negotiation at that time in that game because people really wanted to get with that person.
Want to be alive.
And it's only going to be 3 of the 6 players that whole game.
Yep.
That's a good point. That's the interesting thing about that game is every time I've played it, and I'm a little slow on the uptake, more so than you guys, but when I play that game, I'm like, oh, that had not occurred to me. The last time we played a 5-player game, and that was the first time it occurred to me that the guy left out can do the betrayal action with no repercussion, really.
Right.
You know, you're not going to lose your honor, but you can do that and manipulate the board significantly.
You know, the more you think about it, it's like, well, wow, he just kind of run into these awesome strategies at a 4, and then it's different at 5, and then it's different at 6. But no, I just think it's so well thought out and so the way he's just created all those cards and how the creatures work and all that sort of. It works awesome. It's
brilliant.
It's different at every player count.
It really is.
So I've been playing a couple things. I've been starting up this Wednesday gaming group where we get together and play some older games maybe that people haven't played yet. And we've played Coldwater Crown. We played Clans of Caledonia. But I'm still kind of stuck on Heaven and Ale, honestly. That's kind of replaced Seven Wonders Duel and even replaced Azul for right now as kind of our go-to game. And I'm realizing over time, switching from a 2-player game of Heaven and Ale to a 4-player game of Heaven and Ale is almost like playing a different game. Strategies that you can use in the 4-player game are not viable in the 2-player game. I've played a couple games at 4 and then switched back to 2 and kept just kind of playing the same way and scored the lowest game I've ever scored playing that ever. But to be honest, I haven't been playing a ton of board games lately. Ever since Monster Hunter World came out.
Oh, you've been playing some video games.
I've just been playing Monster Hunter World with a lot of my free time. We have a whole group that plays together. It's just sucked up so much of our time.
I have not gotten back to video games in a long time. I bought a few, but I haven't even played them.
I've been working. I'm halfway through Shadow of Colossus.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I have Shadow too, but
I
I've
loved
only
it when
beat
it
one.
first came out when it was PS3, and it's just a remake. It's just cleaned up.
It is
and
beautiful, though.
It is gorgeous. It's so
amazing
much
looking.
fun. My kids like to watch me climb up these things and kill them.
That'll change for me with God of War.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So stay tuned. We'll probably be talking about some video games once God of War and some of these new ones come out.
Yep.
That's it for this episode of Chit Chat, though. Thanks for watching episode 13. Now we've got it behind us, so we don't have the unlucky 13 to look forward to. And check us out on Facebook and Twitter and follow everything we do. Thanks for watching.